conference back 15 years ago. She was the chairman of the conference back in 2007 or 2008, correct? So that's her sort of home, and she's always welcome, and she's going to lead the panel on Middle East today. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Yes, I'm very excited to moderate the panel on the Middle East. There have been a lot of developments happening all around the world, and we have seen very successful technology companies and unicorns coming from all over the world. I think Middle East is a little bit behind, and there is a great opportunity there. So I have two amazing speakers today to help us understand what is the opportunity there, what's the recent developments and trends. So with that, I would like to welcome here Chris Rogers, who was a co-founder of the company Nextel, and this company was sold to Sprint for $35 billion many years ago. Now he is the founding partner of Lumia Capital, that's US-based venture capital firm that has a global mandate and invests across emerging markets as well as in the United States. I also want to invite Amar Shadier. Amar is the founder and CEO of the company called Angel. That's a platform for predicting successful startups in the US and all over the world. He'll talk a little bit about his technology later. He also was on the board of two very important organizations important for Middle East. That's Endeavor. That's a global organization that drives the global founders, entrepreneurship all around the world. And TechVadi, that's the Silicon Valley-based organization that connects founders and investors in innovation ecosystem, both from Middle East to Silicon Valley.
Thank you.
So maybe as a start, maybe you can just talk a little bit about your fund, Lumia Capital, and about your company, Angel.
Sure thing.
Okay. I think we're mic'd. What Vera doesn't know is that I'm also an avid yogi practitioner and instructor, so I thought perhaps we could start with some asanas, if you all wouldn't mind standing up and... no, just kidding. Lumia Capital, we're a US based VC investing primarily in US growth stage companies that are looking to go global, but we invest opportunistically in a number of regions, primarily Southeast Asia, LATAM, and MENA. Those are all places that I did business, maybe 20 or 30 years ago in the wireless space as Nextel. And I guess we'll get to the Middle East in a minute.
Yeah, and as Vera mentioned, I'm the co-founder of Angel, and what we do is we work closely with VCs to help them use data and machine learning to scale their early stage selection and sourcing of startups. A lot of the work we also do with startups, so we work with promising startups that are looking to fundraise, and we use our VC analytics to tell them which VCs are going to be the best match for them. Do we have any startups here, especially ones from abroad? Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so that's, and my Middle East connection is obviously I'm from there. I founded a startup there back in 1999. Back then, obviously, the MENA wasn't very VC and startup friendly. So the company was bootstrapped to profitability and around $15 million in annual recurring revenue.
Well, let's try to do a deep dive in Middle East. So if you think about, how do you think about Middle East? So in general, it's a large region comparable to Southeast Asia and to Latin America in my mind. So why you both were attracted to the opportunities, why, what you see there, why you like the region, why everybody else should be excited about it? Chris?
Okay, well, so as mentioned before, I've been doing business in the Middle East for 20-some years, and I've watched many attributes of the region develop. The Middle East is fairly broadly defined, and some people take it all the way from, Egypt or other parts of North Africa into Pakistan, Turkey. And when you look at one of the biggest players, Kareem, which I know we'll talk about, that was effectively their territory. For me, the attractions of the region are many. You have a very youthful population. You have very strong growth in smartphone penetration, internet penetration, e-commerce, some of those attributes. But one of the real differentiators in the region is that you have this heart of the region in the GCC where the GDP is off the charts. Smartphone penetration is world leading. Content consumption is world leading. And so that is an economic heart that can help drive innovation in the whole region. And in fact, they have been. The types of programs that we're seeing start actually putting money into the ecosystem are being generated by some real powerhouses, and that includes the PIF in Saudi, the EDB in Bahrain, some of the interesting funders in Dubai, and also in Abu Dhabi, you now have Mubadala playing in this effort to generate an ecosystem based away from carbon-based fuels and into a tech world.
And GCC, it's basically it's Emirates, it's Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Oman, and I think Qatar, right? So it's basically those oil producing countries. They now have the mandate for innovation economy, and they're putting a lot of energy and resources into driving innovation economies in those very, very rich regions. Amar, so from your side, so you were from the region. Can you tell us how the region developed in the last several years and what you see?
The interesting thing is that the region actually has been very entrepreneurial from a very long time. So, but they were called something different. They weren't called startups. They were called like family businesses, and they used to be kind of inherited between generations. Actually, the VC model itself existed a long time ago in the Middle East in something called mudaraba, which is someone who has money, give it to someone who knows, like a limited partner, gives money to a fund manager, and they're supposed to invest in it. Back then, obviously, a lot of it was just kind of trading. So what's happening now is that we're seeing there is also a lot of experience of VC investing, but it has been more towards funds of funds. So ADIA, Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, has been investing in the valley, but not directly. It's been investing through other fund managers, emerging fund managers. PIF is another example. It's been doing direct deals and also through other funds. Kuwait Investment Authority, I believe, is also active. So there is that appetite, and it's been there for a long time. But now I think the stars are being aligned, and as Chris said, we've got 60% of our population less than the age of 30, and 88% of the Middle East population is online every day. So these are all factors. And then when you look at kind of the catalysts, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, the Kareem exit and all of these things, you start seeing that ecosystem develop. We're already seeing some of the top brand names investing in the region. So obviously Lumia is one of the earlier ones. You've got Axel, Village Capital, General Atlantic, NEA. All of these are coming into the region. We are going to be very close to seeing some more unicorns out of the region, and that's happening very, very soon. I'm talking within this year.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of your geographies, how do you see the region? Chris, maybe you're like, if you're active US investor and you're thinking of investing global, or maybe you invested already in China, India, and thinking for the next, where the innovation concentrated, and if you need to name, top 3 players maybe in the region, who would they be?
Players like companies?
No, more like investors who drive the innovation ecosystem.
Well, I think that's TBD. I think you really look geographically at the moment, and Saudi remains the biggest growth engine and the most attractive market from a GDP accessing point, but doing business there is not yet regularized for global tech companies. Dubai and maybe the Emirates more broadly have this, what they have done is monumental in my view. Obviously, I'm not under 45 or under 55 for that matter, or 25 or 35, but when you look at the stats of places where young adults graduating from top academic systems around the world, Dubai generally now is on the list of cities that they would consider living in, and that certainly wasn't the case 10 or 15 years ago. 15 years ago, there was barely an airport. So that is an amazing accomplishment that has allowed them not just to have a global population among their own, but to attract. We have one sitting right here in the front row pretending that he's on his smartphone. The global population is stunning, and this is going to make them. It gives them the potential to translate all of this demand, all of this capital, into a tech hub. It really is that I think gives it. And so when you ask locations, I mean, there are good reasons to do business in Bahrain. There are some reasonable reasons to do business even in Oman. Qatar, same. But really it's the UAE and then access into Saudi with the enormous populations that also opens up from Egypt across the region.
Emma, you're from Egypt, right? So can you talk about your experience building the company in Egypt? What are the challenges? Did you have access to capital? How was your experience building the company there, and how you ended up in Silicon Valley?
Yeah, it's, I mean, 1999, when you start a company back then, it was very, very difficult. Obviously now, and I think I would say now, the way we look at the region when we're looking at kind of startups from different parts of the MENA, you'll find that where the glamour, the laws, the PR, the support is like Chris said, it's really Dubai right now. Abu Dhabi is trying to be part of that. Bahrain is trying to be also a contender in this. Egypt is really about talent. Jordan is about talent.
Jordan is, and Egypt are what?
Talent.
Talent, right, talent.
A lot of the tech talent,
right.
People that have that, a lot of the tech experience, the developers. We're very heavy with numbers as well and quality. I mean, Microsoft is hiring from Egypt. IBM has been always hiring from Egypt. And you have, Apple is hiring Egyptians all the time as well. So we're very strong on the talent side. So I would say back then we didn't have all the laws and regulations that would help us, start up a company quickly, and maybe bankruptcy laws and all of these things, which are important for startups. And also the stigma of a startup, launching a startup and failing. Back then, it was very hard. I mean, and you needed to drive revenues into the startup if you're going to be successful right away. Or you need to be almost cash flow positive from day one back then. You don't have these problems right now. So I think right now the MENA is really ready for that liftoff. I mean, we'll talk about that with Kareem, but it's really, now is really a very good time for startups and investors.
Obviously, exits is a big part of development of ecosystem. I think we have seen a lot of institutional investors, great fund formation, like Emma, you received the funding from Beko Cappital, Chris invested in several startups. So there are a lot of new funds coming and creating these ecosystems, but of course everybody is waiting for exits to prove that their case was right. So Chris, can you talk about Kareem? For everybody, so Kareem was just acquired last month for $3.1 billion by Uber. So Kareem was widely successful regional companies that build the business across, all economies of the Middle East, majority of the economies of Middle East. And a lot of venture capital funds participated in this huge exit, as well as a lot of employees. So Chris and Lumia were, I think, the first US-based investor who came and made the investment earlier in the company, and congratulations on the great exit. So can you tell us why you like the company, why you made the investment in the company, and also talk about Kareem in terms of the results for the ecosystem overall?
Sure. So Kareem, 13 countries, ride-hailing, undisclosed revenues, but large, created over 1 million jobs in that region, and as mentioned, recently announced what is a very solid transaction with Uber. And the reason we liked it was the demographics of the market overall were compelling. The smartphone penetration, which of course is an absolute requirement for any kind of business like that, again, in that heart of the region, was very strong, and the management team. Now, this management team was only partially local, Many of them had lived there for a long time, but they were from different parts around the world, and that actually reinforces my point about one of the real strengths of the heart of that region. The GCC is quite global. And we as global investors were able to compare their numbers to decks we had seen from around the world in the ride-sharing space, including the US. Some of their metrics, which I won't detail, were stunning. So it was kind of a no-brainer for us to get in there, except, of course, that you were competing against Uber, where everybody back here said, how could you possibly invest against Uber? As it turned out, it was a good deal. And what is most compelling now for the ecosystem is the impact it will have. As you mentioned, it will turn a lot of people into potential investors. The management will stay on and run the Middle East, and they are as mission-driven a team as I have ever seen in a for-profit entity. And so their goals for that region are aligned with profit-making, but they're also aligned with building the tech ecosystem. So that's going to have a huge impact. What I think is really important is that they've taken a huge employee base, many of whom come from places like Egypt, where they don't necessarily have the financial backing yet. They don't have a robust venture entity, and they don't have a huge sovereign fund that can seed money. But they do have an education system that is second to none. And these people all have now the sort of mantle of Kareem around their neck. So they're going to have easy times getting great jobs, easy times helping start companies, and good experience to make sure that those are likely a success.
Amar, through your work at Endeavor, and Kareem is obviously Endeavor company as well, have you seen a lot of other companies coming from the regions that you can predict that they'll be successful as well? What do you see, through Endeavor eyes happening in the region? And Endeavor is a large organization. They made a big commitment to the region. They opened branches all over Middle East and found support and financing a lot of companies there. So how are you guys looking at that?
Sure. So, I mean, immediately I would say there are two that are really very interesting. Swivel, which is actually a company that was by Kareem employees that went out and did their startup, Swivel. So it's this bus sharing kind of service. And Moldova is really one of the top content platforms it is the top content platform in the region, one in the world as well. So Moldova, these two are really geared for some great news about them, I would say, very soon. That's kind of, there are other companies as well, but I would say these are really close to kind of bigger news, I would say. And in general, I mean, one thing just to add, Kareem is one of many exits as well that have happened. Maybe not many, but some high-profile ones. So Yahoo bought Maktub before. Intel bought SysDsoft as well, which is a major kind of tech acquisition that has been very rare in the region. A lot of the people interested in the region have been interested in the numbers and the base, and this one was really a tech acquisition, which is really very, very validating for the engineering talent that we have there. Amazon, as you know, obviously bought Souq as well. So there are these kind of big acquisitions that are happening in the region, and I would say this is just going to catalyze the coming period. Yeah, so.
In terms of culture, I think culture is, a very big, important thing. So for U.S. investors investing from U.S. in the region, and for American companies that want to expand into the region and set up the presence there, what they need to understand about the region and how, they can be successful, in the region.
Well, it's one of those things that you often learn by example. What you would find in most areas, particularly in the people involved in technology, is that they're probably better educated than you are, meaning than I am, for sure. And for sure their English is better than my Arabic. And they are global citizens almost to a person. They have, an uncle in Ottawa that they visited every summer, or they went to London School of Economics, or whatever. So you really don't have to deal that much with it in the tech ecosystem. Same with the VCs. Having said that, I would say that this is not a period of time to go randomly into the region. Not because the region isn't poised for growth, and not because there aren't some great startups there, but there actually is this influx of capital, assuming that the initiatives under PIF, the Saudi Venture Capital Corporation, the Hub 71, the Mubadala Fund, the Bahrain EDB-based fund, Al-Waha, the $500 million that Saudi Telecom Ventures has to play with. This is a lot of capital, and there are not enough startups, in my estimation, and we see a lot of them, to absorb it fully. So while it's great for the ecosystem, and I'm a huge believer that this is going to come out the other end in a great shape, I would say that there will be choppy waters because it's virtually impossible to perfectly time the supply of capital with the supply of good startups. And so working with good local firms, of which there are a number who have been around the block a few times, I would say is a critical way to do it.
And last question for Amar. So you run the platform to predict the success of startups. So how do you see the region? What your numbers based on your analytical software tell you about, how successful will be the region and its best startups?
It's so interesting. I mean, what Chris said kind of really mirrors a lot of what we're seeing on the data perspective. So the primary driver for our scoring system is looking at founders and founder data and the quality of the founders and the quality of these teams. And what we're seeing is a distribution that's very similar to the US distribution in terms of talent that's getting into startups, except with one exception. We have a very long kind of, or a fat tail, which means that there are more people jumping on board that startup ecosystem that are trying to launch their startups, and they might not have kind of all that it takes to be there. So there is going to be more noise right now than there is. So I would be, the data kind of seconds what Chris has just mentioned.
Great. Are we out of time, or?
Are you joining in?
I would love to. If I can set up one of your laps, that'll be fantastic. Now, can we give a hand to these three wonderful people, please? Thank you so much.